congratulations. And it's the fourth book. I mean,
fourth, yeah.
And let's talk about it for a little while before we get to you, Lesley. It features the magnificent creation of Melissa Craig. Can you tell us a little bit about Melissa?
Well, Melissa is the mother of 3 sons, and she treats them very differently. And she comes from a very different social background to her husband, and she is very keen to shake off her own background and to establish herself in a kind of a show business scene. So she has married a man who is much older than her for the sake of security and social status. But how she treats her 3 sons shapes their lives. So even though they have grown up in the same house with the same parents and the same education or went to the same school, they all turn out very, very differently.
That sort of Dr. Spock idea that we're all supposed to treat our children equally doesn't really happen, does it?
No, it absolutely doesn't. I'm one of 9 siblings, so yeah, I know that for sure.
Okay, so you knew about sibling competition.
There was no contraception was illegal in Ireland until about 1989 or something. So big families.
Lesley, welcome to you. And you've got I think it's your 6th novel, isn't it?
5th.
5th. And tell us a bit about it, because there's a kind of reason why, when your publisher mentioned this, I thought, well, that'd be quite nice. I quite fancy getting Lesley on the show. Tell us about your series and what's going on in them.
Well, a long time ago, about 5 years maybe, I thought it would be really interesting to write a crime novel set against the background of a pandemic. And somewhere in the intervening time, real life caught up with me. So I wrote the novels called the Health of Strangers series, and it's about a group of people who work for the North Edinburgh Health Enforcement Team, who are the kind of people that come and track you down if you've missed your monthly health check. And we have a community now where you have people who are immune and have lots of privileges because of that, and people who obviously haven't had the virus yet and are living in fear of it. So we've got kind of 2-tier society. And thinking about this, I work in the voluntary sector, and we work a lot with the police and the NHS and local authority doing emergency planning work. So planning for things like pandemics, I thought it'd be really interesting to think about what new crimes would spring up. And the kind of crimes I was thinking about was, you've got a very vulnerable population, so you'll have lots of scams and things, lots of charlatans trying to sell you cures for this. I also thought about the other kind of crimes, like an increase in domestic violence, because people can't get out so easily. And very sadly, both those things have actually come true. So now that we have a pandemic, to see how close I got, hoarding as well, I got that. Didn't get the thing about toilet rolls, didn't really understand why people are hoarding toilet rolls for respiratory illness, but most of it came true.
But it is kind of, it's in that, what's really fascinating about it is it's like the world as it would be in our future. Do you know what I mean? It is the consequences of a world that has to cope with viruses.
It's the new normal, and my book picks up about 6 months after the peak of the virus. So people are still getting ill, but not in the rate that we're seeing at the moment. The main difference between this pandemic and the one in the book is that I based my virus on Spanish flu, which happened just after World War I, and about 5% of the world's population died from it. So I did kind of think, it'd be really interesting to think about if something like that happened now. This happened hard on the heels of a world war, so people were very much in a keep calm and carry on kind of framework of mind. But we're all a bunch of snowflakes now with nothing like that in our lifetime. How would we react? And I think we're finding out. But the main difference between Spanish flu and this particular virus is the people that are dying from this one are people who have compromised immune systems, underlying illnesses. The people that are most likely to die from Spanish flu were the young and the fit, because it overstimulated your immune system. So if you had a strong immune system, you were more likely to die. So we'd have all the problems that we have now. And then we'd also have people being extremely worried about their teenagers and children.
So, there was Liz saying about the joys of bringing any book out in pandemic. And it is quite strange, isn't it? When there's world when we don't know what book sales are and where the bookshops are. even likely to come back sometime over the next few weeks. But actually, when all this happened, did you begin to think, oh God, actually this is a bit too close to the knuckle to be publishing a book like this?
Yeah, I mean, we've had all these kind of SARS things, and even few that didn't really turn into anything. And then there was this talk of this new illness in China, and I thought, oh, well, people will be a bit interested in pandemics. And then it turned out into this full-scale thing. And it was really, really difficult to launch because how do you do this sort of tastefully? Before we were kind of messing around with props like face masks and things. And my previous, you probably won't be able to see this, but the previous bookmark said, the pandemic's spreading, don't get sick. And you just think that's really not the route you want to go down now that it's actually happening. So we're trying to be kind of, quite low key with the publicity, which is the last thing you want really when you've got a book coming
Lesley, out. I think nobody could accuse you of jumping on a bandwagon here because the book was written and done. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
But yeah, timing wise, it's very tricky. It's
very strange.
Tricky. But I think people really want to read that kind of stuff now as well.
Yeah. I mean, I was worried that people think that this is something that I've banged out in a month and got out there just to capitalize on this. I also have no idea how I'm going to write the next book in the series because there is that thing about this was imaginary, but now everybody's a kind of armchair expert about pandemics, and they're going to be going, well, that wouldn't happen. That wasn't what happened.
Is it set today? Is it set?
It's set in a kind of parallel Edinburgh.
Okay.
So everything else is exactly the same apart from that there's this virus.
That is true. I mean, I think we're all worrying about what we write next because the world. I mean, we all write books set in kind of real worlds, and the real world is the kind of moving target at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And my books are supposed to be funny, so I don't think we're quite ready for the darkly comic take on it yet. maybe in a few months' time. But
I just want to pause and say hello to a few people because we've got a good few regulars turning up. Hi Sue, hi Barry, hi Susan, hi Keith, hi Timea, hi Caroline, hi Ralph. And hi Domenica, who says hello to Liz, and she's very happy to meet you. Domenica is the writer Ellie Griffiths, so hi Ellie.
Griffith. Hi Domenica.
Hi Sven from Hamburg. And
can I just say to Sven from Hamburg, I was supposed to be in Hamburg last week. We were going to go there during the Easter holidays to look at submarines because there's a submarine in Hamburg and there's a submarine, but we had to cancel that. So I'm very disappointed that we didn't get.
I'm very curious as to why you were going to look at submarines.
It's a significant birthday, which you can probably tell from looking at me was my 29th. So I decided I wanted to do something I'd never done before, and I've never been on a submarine, as I think most people at 29 haven't. So we kind of looked at where we could go and visit them, and I lived in Hamburg for a year when I was 21. So we thought it'd be quite nice to go back, bore the kids with, this is where mummy used to live and work, and go and look at the submarines.
Is it the 29th anniversary of or is it the 21st anniversary of your 29th?
There has been a few 29s along the way, yeah.
Yes, I've had that one 2 years ago.
This is a quite weird world for everybody. I mean, we're all shut in the houses at the moment, which is quite a strange thing. And I've got a very roundabout question for you, Liz, because when you were young, you were very ill. You had a brain hemorrhage, and is that right? You were at home for a long time and presumably medicalised for quite a long time at home. I've always wondered because, you have such a richly imaginative world. I mean, your books are really, really full of amazing characters. Does that come from that thing? Does childhood boredom make you build that kind of imagination?
Well, I do wonder about writers of the future because you'll find with a lot of writers that they were sick kids. And a lot of writers of our generation, particularly, because any of us who spent long periods in hospital or long periods at home incapacitated, didn't have any other means of entertainment apart from books. We didn't have PlayStations, we didn't have iPhones, we didn't have iPads. There's only so much you can get out of a doll, really. So yeah, I escaped into the world of books. So books, reading was really my escape route, and I would never have been a writer if I wasn't a reader. So I think that's where when my imagination opened up, I guess.
Because actually, talking about books you read as a childhood, I was reading an Irish Times interview with you, and you mentioned buying a book called The Shoe Shop Bears, which is one I can't say I'd heard of, in a bookshop in Glenbeigh. Now, I get it because that's where my mother-in-law's from. But was that your childhood holiday place? And certainly doesn't have bookshops anymore, sadly.
No, Glenbeigh, I was only there, well, I passed through it a couple of years ago, but I was only there once on one summer holiday, and my family rented a cottage down there. And at the time, there were 6 children in the family, and we were all allowed to buy a book, and it was the first book I bought that wasn't a picture book. It had loads of words in it, because I'd gotten really bored at picture books because there wasn't enough story in them for me. So I bought The Shoe Shop Bears, and very sadly it's gone out of print now. It was a lovely story about these bears who were used to entertain children in a bookshop, but at night they came alive, and they looked after the young girl, the 15-year-old girl who worked in the shoe shop. I mean, it was set in the 1940s or 1950s or something. And the writer, her name is Margaret J. Baker. I tried to track her down. I lost, I had the book when I was a child, and I tried to re-buy it. And eventually, via Amazon, who I wouldn't normally buy my books from, I got a secondhand copy that was being thrown out by a library in Mississippi. And so I refound the book. So I now have a copy of it behind me here somewhere.
Was it everything you imagined? Or was it like different?
No, it was very childish. But I was a child, I was probably about 6. So it was beautifully written, though. When I reread it, it was beautifully written. But I really wanted to buy copies for all my nieces and nephews, but it's out of print, and I'm afraid I'm too mean to lend it, because it's a book that meant so much to me. I'm going to keep it.
But in that sort of sense of not just about what you read and stuff like that, I think I've got a rubbish truck about to go through mine, so if it gets a bit noisy here, which is a rarity. It's also about how much you do in your head, because your books have these casts of characters, and they're quite horrible people quite a lot, but they're also fantastically eccentric. Do you know what I mean? You like the eccentricity of people, aren't you, in that kind of way?
Yes, I'm drawn to weirdos, not in real life, but to sinister characters in literature. If you think of Engleby by Sebastian Faulks, I was fascinated by that character, or Freddie Montgomery in the Book of Evidence by John Banville, or Logan Mountstuart in Any Human Heart by William Boyd, or any of the weird characters in Secret History by Donna Tartt. Like, those characters have always fascinated me, the kind of offbeat outsider, slightly sociopathic, the characters who don't fit in have always really appealed to me, and that's why I write about them, I guess.
I mean, the first, obviously, character that really got everybody was the Unraveling Oliver, which was a book which really sort of broke a lot of molds at the time, and had quite a sort of shocking the first sentence even. But where did he come from?
Unraveling Oliver, there was a couple of sources to that. One was my dad's childhood, which mirrored Oliver's in one way, in that when he was 10 years old, his mother died, and his father remarried within 6 months, I think. And his new wife said that she would take care of the 2 younger boys. There was 4 boys in the family, but that she wouldn't take care of the 2 older boys. So my dad was sent to a boarding school that was 5 minutes from his home, and he could actually see his house from the boarding school, but he wasn't allowed to come home, and he wasn't allowed to come home during the Christmas holidays or the summer holidays either. And he had to stay with the priests some of the time. And I just thought that was unbelievably tragic, and what a cruel thing to do to your kid. But also, there there was lots of different inspirations for it. I spent a summer in a chateau in the south of France on a family holiday, so that's where all of that part of the chateau and the French thing, because I read up on the history of the place at the time, and it was where Nazi roundups had happened, and Jewish people were sent to Drancy and then on to Auschwitz from this town that I was in near Bordeaux. So there was a lot of history there to use. There were several sources of inspiration for it. I can't pin one down particularly.
Lesley, when you're writing series, and as you say, well, obviously it has particular problems. But how do you find when when you're starting a new book in a series? This is the fourth book in the series, Murder at the Music Factory. You're going to have to hold it up and wave it now for me because I've put it on the front.
No, I'm holding the wrong direction. Murder at the Music Factory. Yeah.
And it's a great cover too. Where do you start with when you're doing a series? Because you know who the characters are and you know where it's set. Where do you start with to differentiate one from the next?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what Liz and yourself are like, but I'm a plotter. I like to know where I'm going with it all. So I'm not the kind of writer. Yeah, you're shaking your head. Yeah, there's not a lot of sympathy for this view in writing, but I quite like to know where I'm going. So I sit down, write the synopsis, plan it out from beginning to end. And I do have a kind of, because it's a series, a kind of overarching plot as well as the individual plots from the books. So I have my characters. They have developed in ways, some of which I knew about and some of which surprised me when you start writing and think, well, actually, this is what happens and this is how they've reacted to this situation. Yeah, so it is all kind of plotted out in advance. Yeah.
Alex Hawley has put a question, which I don't know. Alex is a reviewer of audiobooks, so he's asking, what does Liz think of the number of narrators in Unraveling Oliver and how it translates into audio?
I thought it was great actually, because it was more like listening to a radio play. There's 8 or 9 characters in Unraveling Oliver, and instead of having one actor doing them all, they got 8 different actors, and because they're all Irish, and because I worked in theatre and film, and it had to be recorded in London, I got to choose who the actors were, because I knew actors, and I knew who the Irish actors were who were in London. So I got to choose my actors, and I think they were all superb. I have to say, I was really pleased with that. And it's the same with all of my books. I've been able to choose who the actors are in the Audible versions.
Giving work to actors, which is a noble task in itself, to be honest.
I particularly tried to give the work to actors who were unreasonably treated in their past.
So you knew things about their careers that needed ironing out. I mean, I do think it's remarkable, especially with these like a lot of the so-called psychological fiction and things like that is often multi-narrated, and actually the old-fashioned book form doesn't suit it in lots of ways because the readers are kind of left not knowing where they are. So I love the idea that they're beginning almost to be produced, the audiobooks.
Yeah, I mean they are mine certainly. Because in most of them, there are multiple narrators, so to listen to it, it's more like a radio play as opposed to listening to a book.
Do you have audiobooks there, Lesley?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I didn't have any choice over the actors, so they were great, the ones he chose.
It's always nice. I used to not listen to them because I was so terrified of hearing somebody. Actually, I find it bad enough reading it myself, let alone listening to anybody else reading it. So it's been really revelation, actually realizing that they're kind of brilliant thing. And they're obviously doing really well right now, audiobooks. I think audiobooks and ebooks seem to be what people are buying, obviously, because it's the ones they can get hold of. But you're also published by an independent, Sandstone. Can you tell us a little bit about Sandstone and how you hooked up with them?
Sandstone are great publishers. They used to be based in Dingwall, but now they've moved to the bright lights of Inverness. So they're right up in the north there. I think they're the only publisher in the Highlands. And And the way I came to them is my colleague that I work with in my day job had been published by them, and I'd written a novel, wasn't quite sure what to do with it. And she said, oh, send it to them. And I sent it off thinking, oh, well, at the very least, I'll get some comments on it because they know Rebecca and they'll be polite. But then they picked it up. And, you know, I was suddenly on this tram line to being published, and having gone from sort of finishing a novel, not really sure what to do with it, hadn't done anything like get an agent or that, just ended up being published, which is a lovely story. But I think there are probably steps along the way that I missed out on. And I think I'm very, very fortunate in that the Scottish crime writing circles are very, very welcoming. So there were people that I didn't even know came along to book launches and things at the beginning, all the things that you don't know that like, I've got a book launch, I've got to have a blog tour. What are these things? Why would anybody be interested? So I found the crime writing really, really supportive.
Scotland is extraordinary. Sorry, William.
No, you carry on.
I was just going to say Scotland is extraordinary for the number of crime writers it has produced. I mean, you really can't throw a stone in Scotland. Not that I'm encouraging anybody to throw stones in Scotland, but you can't throw a stone in Scotland without hitting a writer. And you've so many festivals. I mean,
oh yeah, we have lovely festivals. We've got big urban ones. Well, we've got the bloody Scotland one in Stirling, but we've got lots of little rural ones as well, ones on islands, all of which are great. The only downside is, I'm an Edinburgh author, Edinburgh born and bred, but you're treading on some pretty well-trodden, streets there to the point where in this book, which was Death at the Plague Museum, I actually made up an entire museum just so that I could be absolutely sure that nobody had been murdered there before. I mean, Edinburgh is a lovely place to be writing about, and I can see why people do want to put murders down these little dark closes and cobbled streets and things.
I wonder, is it something to do with Scotland's kind of ancient history and spookiness and Macbeth and, there's so much kind of ghostliness and
it's quite dark of a winter and
long dark winters. Although we have our fair share of long dark winters in Ireland, but we're further south, so they're not as long or as dark. But I'm hugely impressed with the output that Scotland has given us. I enjoy reading you.
I read books in Scotland. I mean, I think there's a noticeable difference when you go to festivals in Scotland about people buying books, because they seem to eat books in Scotland, in a way that sadly the English don't in such quantity. You meet lots of great readers, but it's a very book-based culture. And actually there's something going on in Ireland that's very conspicuous about crime and women writers, isn't there? I mean, there's just been over the last few years just
huge splurge,
an outpouring of really talented, really rich, very often focused on family, dysfunctional family things, which is, why would that come from Ireland? Sort of drama. Is that a collegiate thing as well in Ireland?
Yeah. I like Lesley was saying. Lesley?
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, God. Jeez, I've got the name wrong. Like Lesley was saying, it's an extremely collegiate bunch of writers, and not just the women, but the men too, are all extremely supportive of each other, and we're all pleased for each other's success, and we'd be in our little WhatsApp groups together and punching the air for any time somebody wins a prize. Like it's a really nice feeling. It's not like a competition, because there's always going to be room for more books. There's always going to be more readers, and the more we band together, the stronger we are. And we might give Tartan Noir a run for its money with Emerald Noir. That's
Emerald Noir. I was going to ask, do you have a noir name?
Emerald Noir. Here we come.
I don't know if it's the same in Ireland, but all the Scottish crime writers seem to have a second string to their bow, because we've got the fun-loving crime writers, the musical band, and Bloody Scotland has a football match. So I'm kind of feeling that I don't really bring an awful lot to the table here, being either musical or good at sport. But are Irish crime writers equally talented? And
I haven't. We don't have a team of anything.
Would you be able to enter a football team if required?
I never said that.
I certainly would not be able to enter a football team, nor can I play a musical instrument. I might try the triangle if I was forced, but no. But we might win at a drinking competition against the Scots. The English, I'm sorry, William, you just put your hands.
There are a few crime writers that would, be in the running for that.
Was earlier plugging his own website, I think, with obviously was a blog post about Liz down the bottom there. If anybody can copy that, it looks like it's a WordPress one, but the page is 3453. But anyway, there you go. I should be able to copy that and put it on. Anyway, it's in the comments if anybody wants to follow it.
What? Where?
It's on now. You see, you'll.
Oh, is that Keith B. Walters?
It's Keith B. Walters.
Okay, he's just put up a link to about my books. I think it might be his blog.
Yeah, I hope so.
Could be his blog.
Yeah. I'm enthusiastic.
Thanks, Keith.
It could be anything, Keith. Craig's suggesting there's a difference between Scotland and Ireland when it comes to mood, maybe, and I think that's probably true. Yeah. Anyway, in terms of just what you're both doing now, and this is such a weird time, are you doing anything different or new because you're in the house all the time? Are you learning something? Are you learning that new musical instrument that you're not playing, or anything like that? What are you doing that's different?
Well, I actually work 4 days a week, and as I said, I work in the voluntary sector, and one of the responsibilities we have is for dealing with volunteers. And obviously there's been a huge volunteer response or people wanting to volunteer to help out around coronavirus. And to be honest, we're busier than ever. We're all working from home, but busier than we ever were. And on top of that, I've got 2 sons, both of whom are homeschooling. So, and I foolishly thought, oh, well, the one thing is when we all start working from home, we won't have meetings anymore. So I'll have lots of time to catch up with stuff. But every single meeting I ever had just turned into a Zoom meeting, plus a few more specifically around coronavirus. So no, I haven't learned any new musical instruments or anything. I've just had very long days staring at a computer screen.
Is there anything you're doing, Liz, that's different?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I haven't learned any new skills. Well, I'm trying to write a play, which is a new thing for me. I've never written a play before. Well, I wrote one for TV about 10 years ago, but it was a half-hour TV play. So I'm writing now a full-length stage play, and I'm finding it incredibly difficult. And, I always have to remind myself that I say this when I'm writing a novel as well. It's incredibly difficult. It's so hard. But this I'm just finding, because I go to the theatre a lot. I'm a regular theatre goer, and I used to work in theatre backstage. So you would think it would come easy to me being such a regular attendee. But in fact, I'm finding it really hard, and I don't know if it's because I'm finding it really hard because it's a play and I've never written a play before, or because I'm finding it really hard because it's just what's going on and I cannot concentrate. Mm-hmm. I am constantly checking news sites and numbers and the WHO website, and looking at statistics all over the world to see how we're doing and or how we compare to other countries, and desperately worried about my American friends, desperately worried about, what's going on there. And to a lesser extent, my UK friends. It's a very worrying time. And that worry makes it hard to actually concentrate. So
I've heard that a lot, actually, about how much of the brain it seems to take up for some writers, that it actually makes that creative bit of the brain quite hard. And it also seems a little irrelevant sometimes when you're writing.
But I've heard a lot of people saying that it has that they're finding it hard to read. I'm finding it the opposite. In fact, I'm reading more than I've ever read because it's an escape.
Right.
It's like when I was in the hospital when I was a kid. I escaped from the pain by reading and getting into another realm and another world. So that's working for me.
Andy Hill was suggesting a hurling game for Emerald Isle, which was almost launched me into a long anecdote, which I tried to tell when I had Val McDermid on, but never could get a word in edgeways in that either. But I don't think I will.
Hurling would be great, only no other country plays it. So I don't think,
I did think that you learn Irish dancing at school, don't you? And we do Scottish country dancing, so maybe we could have some kind of dance-off between us.
Great.
Well, I actually used to work on Riverdance as a stage manager, as a production manager, many years ago. So I never did Irish dancing, but I watched a hell of a lot of it. I watched the same show probably 700 times on tour around the world. So yeah, I know Irish dancing. I know what it looks like. I know what it's supposed to look like, but I couldn't. I have a bad leg as it is, so I couldn't lift my knee even for one step. I couldn't balance on one leg. No,
Fine excuse,
not for me.
Yeah. Sven asks, if you've got to recommend a book to a new reader each from your collections, Lesley and Liz, which book would you choose them to start on?
You go first, Lesley.
Well, I mean, it's easy if you're into the pandemic thing and you want to read more about pandemics, start with this one, Health of Strangers, which is the first in the series that kind of sets the scene of the pandemic that's going on. But I've taken the precaution of also having prepared one earlier that isn't about pandemics, in case that's the last thing that you want to read. And this was my debut novel, which was longlisted for the McElvenny Award, which is for the best Scottish crime novel.
Congratulations.
And that was several years ago, but it was great for a debut to get you sort of started out into the world. And this is called The Fine House in Trinity, which is the area of Edinburgh that I live in. So my inspiration was looking out the window, all the big old houses in Trinity, and thinking what would happen if a minor criminal from Leith, which you might have heard of that area of Edinburgh, if he inherited one of these houses up here. And of course, somebody wants to kill him for that. So again, it was funny. Before I did writing, I did a stint as a stand-up comedian, and this was my first book after that. So it was I knew I wanted to write something funny, but it was basically in its first draft was just a series of set pieces and jokes, kind of loosely interlinked by something resembling a plot. So I had to go back and learn to write characterization and proper plotting and things. So did quite a lot of learning on it, but it was really enjoyable. So I've covered the market there, pandemic or non-pandemic.
Very good. I'm not very prepared. You're very well done there. How about you, Liz?
Yep.
I have no pandemic books to recommend, but I've only written 4, and I guess if you want something really dark, I would go for Skin Deep or the new one. I don't have them to hand. I only have the new one, Our Little Cruelties, which there you go, which is dark but funny in places. So there's definite sense of humor about it. The one that is the darkest, I think, is probably Skin Deep. The one that is the easiest to read, the most straightforward to read, is Lying in Wait. But I think, like any mother, my firstborn child, Unraveling Oliver, is dear to my heart because I was in labour with that book for 8 years.
Amazing. And then they say have another one next year after you spent 8 years on one. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. They're all standalone books, so you can read them in any order you want. But I think Unraveling Oliver is probably the cleverest of the books. Lying in the Wait is a simpler read, but kind of devastating ending. They've all got devastating endings. Yeah, I kind of specialize in devastating endings. Everybody gets destroyed. Spoiler alert, everybody gets destroyed in the end.
I'm well over my time limit, so I just want to quickly go through a couple of things. Barry says it's tough here in America, but it is all over the world. We're reading so many books. Susan says, Jess, if we can invent a new Edinburgh Museum, we can invent anything, especially a COVID-free world, which is probably true. But anyway, I'm going to oh, look, Dawn Draper, who's a
oh, right. I love you, Dawn, whoever you are.
She knows
Follow Dawn's example.
There you go, it's worked. Promotion. And look, Keith says he'll be putting a page up. No, he'll be checking out your Lesley book too, so they'll probably be another.
Excellent.
You have lovely, I was going to say watchers, listeners, viewers. They are
very lovely people. Well, the ones that post more lurking. But anyway, no, it's brilliant. Listen,
I should, just before you wrap up,
yeah.
Can I point in that direction?
Oh, you're so good. I put you under the right bit.
Oh, you're in the right bit, yeah.
Sorry. William Shaw, Gravesend, his new book out the 14th of May. Buy
Sadly,
that one too.
They've gone and put the hardback back till July sometime, and it's going to be a car crash of novels. You snuck in just before the congratulations on it. Anyway, brilliant. Congratulations both of you. And today is your publication day, Lesley.
It is. So if you want more, we'll be back on Twitter at 8 trying to launch this thing virtually.
What will be the hashtag?
I'll be raising a glass to you.
Music Factory.
Brilliant. Okay. Listen, Lesley, Liz, thank you so much for joining me. It has been a complete blast, and I'm very, very happy to have actually had the longest conversation I've ever had with Liz and to meet you, Lesley.
Thank you. It's lovely to meet you both. Cheers. Thanks.
Okay. Right.